Hey, hello everyone! We are here for our monthly webinar on ethics and games. And our guide and philosopher is Sherry Jones. And what she's going to be taking us through today is the vanishing of Ethan Carter. So I'm going to go ahead and let her get started.
Okay, thank you, Kay, for the introduction. So again, this is the Ethics and Games series, and we are featuring the Vanishing Ethan Carter. And I decided to put a moving GIF today to kind of show you how amazingly beautiful this game is. I really can't capture how pretty it is based on the screenshot. So there you go. There's one moving GIF for you guys. So next.
Definitely agree. It's definitely a well-designed game.
Mm-hmm. So first, let's talk about what exactly it is. Okay, what is Ethan Carter? Next. All right, so it is labeled as a first-person horror adventure game. When I first played this game back in 2014, I didn't think of it as a horror adventure. It wasn't very horrific for me. It's horrific in other ways, but not as in gore or blood, okay? But it's developed and published by the same team, the Astronauts. And it was available on MS Windows, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. So I played it on the PlayStation 4 version, okay? So it's very famous for several things, which is first, the storytelling techniques that's employed in the game is quite innovative compared to its peers. The gameplay worked very, very well with story, and also the environmental design, which you guys have already heard a hint from Chris, is that it's really well designed. Earned it the Best Game Innovation Award from the 2015 BAFTA. So that's a really big deal for this game. And one of the things that made the game stood out is that it used the technique that's been around in photography forever. It's called photogrammetry, to take multiple photographs of an environment and using those real world environments to design the in-world environment. So please go next. Okay, so here's an example of photogrammetry at work. So the astronauts team actually took photo of a real world location. And yes, it is in Wisconsin, okay, the real world location. And then they mapped it to the game. This is why the game in-game graphic looks so incredibly realistic, because they actually took real world locations and added their flourishes onto the design. Okay, so next. Okay, so The Vanishing Ethan Carter is set in the fictional town of Red Creek Valley, Wisconsin. It's actually based on a real world place, but they named it Red Creek Valley, okay, for the fiction that's in the game. The game revolves around this character called Paul Prospero. So he is that paranormal investigator, and he received a fan mail from a 12-year-old boy named Ethan Carter to invite him essentially to go to Red Creek Valley. Now, when Prospero enters Red Creek Valley, he discovered a lot of weird things on the way, some supernatural events on the way when he was going to go visit Ethan Carter, okay? So we as the player play as Prospero. And our goal is to figure out what exactly happened to Ethan Carter. And naturally, the title of the game kind of gives us a clue that that's the whole objective, because the game is called The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Okay, so next. Okay, so the other thing that made this game really stand out is that the Astronauts team decided to apply Thomas Grip's 4-layer narrative design approach. It's actually very, very complicated, but I condensed it down into its particulars. And I promise you, if you take any one of these particulars to try to design a game, it will take you hundreds of pages to write, okay? So the 4 layers are gameplay. So gameplay, grip, breaks down to coherency, streamlining, a sense of accomplishment, action confirmation. So for example, action confirmation would be referring to when I do something in the game, did I get any kind of feedback that what I did was correct? Okay, so that's a basic explanation of action confirmation, which involves actually programming and doing mechanics. The layer 2 of the narrative is narrative goal. So you can create a goal based around the theme of mystery, uncomfortable environment, character conflict. And by the way, before I keep going, I just realized I forgot to mention this, that when we say story and narrative, as we have covered before in the Metagame Book Club, is that the narrative is not exactly the same thing as a story. Narrative basically refer to everything that's in a game, including character, including dialogue, including environment, including every action you can conceive. We call that a narrative, okay? So the 4-layered narrative design approach is designing every element of the story world, the narrative. So layer 3 is the narrative background. Go ahead.
I was going to ask a quick question.
Yes.
Where did the astronaut team get the 4-layer narrative design approach?
The astronaut team contacted Thomas Grip, so they actually have connections between them, but also Thomas Grip and the Frictional Games team, so he has his partner, actually presented their design approach at GDC, at the Game Developer Conference.
Great.
Yeah, so there's this discussion already. And it's not that new. It's been around for a while, but this particular game, the Vanishing Ethan Carter, applied the entire narrative design approach to design their game. Yeah.
Great. I'll have to go and see if it's in the GDC vaults yet.
I think it is.
If I can pull up the presentation.
Yeah,
cool.
I think it is. Yeah. Sorry. Narrative background refers to the context, the narrative context that help us understand what's happening in the game as we're playing the game, okay? And layer 4 is mental modeling. So you're modeling specific scenarios. And so that's all that you can mentally model, but he offers some suggestions like danger scenarios, goal-focused mystery, social pressures. This all sounds very general, but when you break down the actual discussion, it's actually quite complicated. But this is just to show you where the design comes from, okay? So next. Okay, there are some themes of this game. Given that the Vanishing Ethan Carter is labeled as a horror adventure game, the themes and the scenarios in the games are more appropriate for adult, mature audiences. So you might want to take that into consideration if you're going to try to have younger children play this game, because they might not be as appropriate. So some of the themes that appears in the game, such as, I just label a few here: conformity versus individuality, fantasy versus reality, child abuse, that's a big one, trauma, confronting the truth, unreliable narrator. So that's that term where a narrator is the person telling you the story, okay? But in literary studies, when we ask whether or not a narrator is reliable, is when you question whether or not the narrator is telling you the truth, because we only get the story from the narrator in that kind of a narrator-driven storytelling, okay? Fragmented memory, which is memory that's all over the place. Memory and identity, which is whether your identity is constantly changing due to the amount of memory that you have. Memory and truth, multiple consciousness, subjectivity and reality, and multiplicity of truth. So I just grabbed a few of the major themes that really stood out when you play this game. And also the gameplay experience really show you how weird, how strange reality truly is. So if you can go next, show you what that means. So for example, this is pretty hard to see, but it's actually a rail car and it appears and disappears into thin air. So this will be an example where reality is constantly contested in the game. So next. All right, so I'm going to introduce an ethical theory that I think is relevant to the discussion of this game. And I just want to preface this by saying that the game designers did not borrow any kind of philosophical theory to design this game, but it's purely their obsession over how to tell a great story. And they got their inspiration from the game, as also the book, The Incident That Happened in Elk Creek Bridge. That particular game, the designers admitted that they watched the game, they also read the book and got inspired by the story from that particular book, okay? So I'm gonna discuss my ethical theory that I think is relevant to the game. So next, please. Okay, so one of my favorite philosophers, of many philosophers that I adore, is Baruch Spinoza. And Baruch Spinoza introduced a type of monism into Western philosophy. So he is a very, very famous Dutch philosopher from the 17th century who created a rationalist philosophy by proposing a monist view of God. Okay. And essentially, he is also known as, some people deem him as the first scientist in Western history, the first scientist. Okay. This is debatable. Obviously, Descartes and Spinoza, they around the same time. I will discuss further on what I mean by Spinoza's monist God later in this presentation, because we have to discuss what the game essentially is and how it runs before I can show you the connection between the game and that philosophy. Okay, so please go next. Okay, so this game is full of puzzles. So I'm going to discuss how the narrative puzzles work and what the mechanics are. So please go next. All right, so the game is divided. It flows in a singular way. You don't see loading screen, you don't see levels, okay? But if you divide the game up, you can see that there are 10 distinct narrative scenes or levels in this game. And each level has different puzzles. Because there's so many different types of puzzles, I'm listing the few that really stands out from the game, okay? So you have point and click mechanism on puzzle pieces. And the way you solve the puzzle would be to click on objects in a chronological order to solve the puzzle. Second type is, for example, you insert object into empty slots. And when you insert certain other objects, it will solve the puzzle, that kind of puzzle. The third kind is to sync elements to a specific location. So what I'm talking about is syncing elements to specific spaces in the game. And when you sync, it unlocks the puzzle. So that will make sense when I show you screenshot how that works in the game. Okay, so next. All right, so I love this intro from the game. When you first start the game, the caution says this game is a narrative experience that does not hold your hand. So essentially, it's basically telling you, we're not going to give you clues on how to solve anything. Basically, you're going to have to use your wit and intuition and also careful investigation of the environment to figure out how to solve this game. Okay, so please go next. All right, so let's talk about one type of puzzle mechanics, and I call this sense trap reveal rift. So you can go next. Okay, I'm going to go through this pretty fast. So this is one of the many, many puzzles in the game, okay? And in this particular puzzle, what you're trying to do is to sense where the traps are. So there's traps all over the place. And I was using the PlayStation 4 controller. So it says hold A, right? So I press A to sense the trap. And you can see in the middle of the screen, there's actually a trap right there. I revealed it, okay? So next. All right, so once I reveal the trap, it will show me the rift, so a sliver of the rift. But I haven't solved the entire puzzle yet because there's multiple traps around the environment. So it didn't open for me fully. So please go next. Okay, so here's another example of a trap that I found on the ground. You just press A to reveal that. Next. Okay, and you can see right here that the rift got a little bit bigger. So that means, no, you haven't solved it yet, but you made a bigger opening because of what you just done. Next. Okay, here's another trap. It's on the ground. If you fall in there, you'll die. There's a bunch of spikes in there. So I just click on it to reveal that. Next. Okay, here's another one. I'm just showing you different types of traps. It's all over the environment. Next. Okay, so at this stage, it's much bigger, but what we're looking for in the rift is an entire opening, okay? And I'll explain to you what the rift is in just a sec, but please go next. All right, here's another one. It opens up and it will crush you if you get too close. So I sense that trap. Next. Okay, so at this point, it's much bigger, but we're not there yet. So next. Okay, here's another one. It's a little bit harder to see, but this is one that's sticking up from the ground. This was the last one that I found. It took me forever to find all these, but this is the last one that I found. And the end result, next, is this big rift. So what the heck is this big rift, okay? So in this game, you are jumping between reality, the game reality, whatever that means, and also a fantasy world. So it's between reality and fantasy. And when you solve puzzles, it allows you to move between the worlds. That's what this riff is about, Okay, so next. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how the syncing words to location mechanics work. Next. Okay, so we have a little GIF that I found that was very convenient. So this particular one is I'm moving my cursor, okay, my game control, to the right location on the screen so that the word crow will concentrate and I can find, oh, that's the right place to press A. So this is called location-based control, word syncing to location control. Next. And once I do that, right, once I find the correct spot, the rift will open, I can jump through it. So that's another kind of mechanic that's in that game. Okay, next. All right, so third type is the point and click light puzzle. So next. Okay, so in this game, in this particular puzzle, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It just looked like a street light, but in the middle of the forest. So what you're trying to do is, if you see that there's a little handprint there, you're trying to press the button in a certain particular order. I didn't understand what the order was. I just randomly clicked on it to solve it. But there's a particular order to this that helps you unlock the key. So next.
I actually have a question from YouTube. Excuse me.
Sure.
So Grid is asking, does a player know what the objective is, or do they need to figure it out as well?
Oh, yeah. So let me respond to Grid. The objective is given to you at the very, very beginning of the game, and I will show the introduction after I finish the mechanics to show you how the game starts. Because the way the game starts shows you somewhat of a narrative goal. But the funny thing about this game, okay, and I know that Chris have played this, so I hope I'm not giving too much away here, is that you technically, as a player, don't have to solve any puzzle. You can actually run through the forest and just finish it. The game maker doesn't tell you that. But as an obsessive player, because I'm the type of player that had to solve every little puzzle, okay, in the game to feel satisfied. I actually went through and tried to finish every little objective that's offered. The objectives do not show up on the screen, like, for example, in WoW, where it tells you here's the objective for something. This game is kind of, you randomly go to certain places and maybe the text will show up or maybe a piece of paper will show up to give you a sense of where the goals would be. So it's kind of hidden, okay?
Yeah, I would say it's an exploration game. So really the goal of the game is you're exploring the environment and you're just, as Sherry said, just running around all over the place, trying not to fall in traps. And getting things and just sort of finding things out as you run across them.
Right. And some people has deemed the Vanishing Ethan Carter as a walking simulator, because literally that's what you're doing. You're walking all over the place, and like what Chris said, you try not to fall into traps.
It's the Lord of the Rings, but shorter.
yeah, very appropriate. Yes.
It's and now we walk.
Yes. So let's go to the next slide there. Okay, so this is just to show you. The 4 row. It's actually 4 buttons, so I'm just clicking on random things. Next. Okay, so once I clicked on it in order, and I honestly am telling you, I had no idea what I've done. I just randomly clicked and I figured it out somehow. The rift opens again. Okay, next. And if you did it correctly, you should see an astronaut, a spaceman. And the other side of the rift, you're going, what? Okay, so if we go next. Okay, so it's harder to see. And I know the images I take is in the darker places, but this is where the game is very, very beautiful as well. Very light in certain places, but dark in other places. So if it looks dark, don't think the whole game looks dark, okay? So there's that astronaut that's running, and he's hinting at you to follow him, okay? So I'm following him right now. So next. Okay, now here's the part that's constantly reminding you that the game probably is not fully in reality, because the astronaut disappears. So once in a while, he'll appear and disappear. So he disappears again here. Next. And then after I followed him for a while, and it took me, what, I don't know, 10 minutes running around randomly, I finally found this thing.
If you could find him. Luckily, he teleports pretty much in a straight line. So wherever he's standing, he typically is in that direction that you were facing when you saw him teleport. Because if you get turned around, you have to go do it all over again.
Yes, but I wasn't smart enough to figure out it was linear. I ran all over the place. So it took me like a long time to go, oh, duh, I should follow this guy. So yeah, Chris figured out faster than I did. But anyway, I got to the end and then I saw this crazy thing. So from the sky, this thing lands down. I'm like, what the heck is this? It looks like a spaceship. So next. Okay. We actually get to go inside the spaceship. Very, very trippy. And at this shot, it's really hard for me to take a really nice shot. But this is where we are traveling somewhat through space, through the spaceship. And next.
Yeah, I just hope you're not claustrophobic.
Yeah, it did feel a little bit claustrophobic, actually.
It did.
Yeah. So this part, you see where it's slowed down. This is actually space. So you go, wait a second. I was on Earth. I guess I was on Earth. And all of a sudden I'm in space. So this game does not really follow the rules of physical universe. Please go next. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little more about the reading notes. So there are notes in this game that work also as mechanics, and that when you activate the notes, you can also activate additional dialogue about characters in the game. So this particular dialogue that I got, or notes, is from between Ed, Grandpa Ed, and Ethan. Okay, so please go next. So, for example, I went through the rift. I found a piece of a note on the ground. And like when Grid was asking, how do we know of the objective? It's kind of like this. I walk up and accidentally found a note and it says read. So that's the only indicator that I found some kind of nugget to play with. So I click on read. Next. Okay. So Chris or Kay, do you mind reading for us?
Sure, I can do it. Sap. An old man came to the forest every day to drink sap from the trees. To get there, the old man had to step around many dangerous traps. The villagers believed this old man had hidden a jade amulet in the forest. But the old man wanted villagers to believe this because then they would search the forest for treasure and not drink his sap. One cool fall night, someone set fire to the forest, and the fire spread to the village. The old man escaped the fire by covering himself in sap. When he returned to the village, he found all the villagers' bones. The old man sat down and cried. Then he found more sap to drink.
So, hey, when Chris, when you encountered this, I'm assuming you encountered this note. I don't know. Did this one creep you out?
It was interesting. I mean, I looked around, and it was interesting that in the previous slide, if you look around the area, it's a whole bunch of bones and skulls, and it transforms this like mountain meadow into, like I said, this scene of death and destruction that had happened there. So it's kind of interesting to see how that moved around and seeing the jumping from piece to piece. For me, instead of looking at the Rift model that you had, I think really when it's kind of funny because it's almost like you get premonitions from different things you find. So like where you start seeing the picture of everything, you start getting premonitions, and then based on that, you try to find the different pieces. Like the crow one, to me, I interpreted that more as a vision of where the next piece of the puzzle needed to be. And
right.
so that was the whole thing. And then, but you're right, it unlocks the scenario, and it kind of reminds me a bit of the Never Alone game I played.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That we talked about probably about a year or two ago.
Yeah.
That was similar to this in that as you went through, the difference was they actually had little owls to designate, hey, here's a point of interest for you to gather as you're running from scene to scene. With the Vanishing of Ethan Carter, there's nothing. I mean, you just walk around and all of a sudden something pops up and you're like, oh, I should click on that. Okay, so
right, exactly. I think this is harder.
Yeah. Well, exactly, it is, and I'll tell you, this is not the type of game I like. I actually like. I'm much more into the clear directives as far as the realms. I mean, it was interesting. Like I said, it's just one of those things that if I'm trying to, I have to be in the mood to do this type of thing because I'm not necessarily an explorer by nature. When it comes to games, I usually want to accomplish objectives because I'm a completionist. But the thing, this is what I know about myself. But with this game, it was just sort of like you just run around willy nilly, and luckily it took me a while, and I finally found the way to run. And then that made everything a lot easier because then I was like, okay, I mean, I'm sure Prospero must be in super shape because I ran him all over the place. It was like
never slows down or anything. Yeah.
exactly, never like loses his breath or loses stamina. I mean
Yeah.
that guy is fit.
And where I would jump in because Chris was giving me his review of the game, I would say that this game would work well for people who like to say go into virtual worlds and like to go and wander and figure things out, and not necessarily, like you said, have the things keep popping up with different objectives and quests and things like that. So my recommendation with this is it's a beautiful game that people who like to go into Second Life or other virtual worlds to explore, they would find this very interesting.
I agree with you. Okay, I think I can speak for myself because what Chris was alluding to, right? We're talking basically about player psychology and type of players there. But I myself, I personally have to admit, I don't like taking a directives from anybody. So the way I play games usually kind of manifests this mentality is I don't want to be told by the game, go here, go north, or give me anxiety that I didn't go north because they told me to. I do not like those kind of games. Yeah.
I'm an optimizer. I like min-maxing games and things like
Right.
that. So
Right.
I like efficiencies and because I'm it's the accounting background.
Of course.
But yes, I'm going out here and I'm going like, there's no efficient way to search for these things. What's going on? So I started to develop my own little grid system where I just sort of went, okay, I went down one tree, then I went all the way across, and then I went down the next tree. And so I sort of worked out in a sort of a grid pattern, and it's kind of funny, but yeah, no, it's a beautiful, beautiful game. Definitely really stunningly visual. And it's just one of those things that make sure you have time when you play this game as well. If you try to do this on a timeline, it's very, very difficult. I mean, there are guides out there if you want to find guides, but
that's cheating.
Otherwise, that is cheating. But hey, we're in the world of cheats.
Yeah.
But the thing is you can go through it and take your time. Definitely, this is a game that you want to take your time to. It is kind of, I mean, there is some horror component to it, but I think you're going to get to what that is a little bit later on.
Right.
But yeah, it's not uber scary. It's the music is also really well. It's interesting how they channeled subtle changes to the music as you play the game is really interesting.
Yeah, I also agree with you. I don't think it's that scary in the sense of like gore or monsters or anything like that, but the ending of the game is absolutely horrifying for me, and it scared me to the core till today. I mean, I still, like I said, I should have done this game. I saved it for our 4th round, but seriously, it's still stuck with me.
Exactly. So if you're someone who's negatively affected by horror, just play the beginning of the game, enjoy the environment, and then just walk away.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to go next since there's a lot of slides, but we're going to go next there. Yeah. So, Chris, if you don't mind, keep going a little bit on the dialogue.
Sure. Ed, Ethan, I told you can't be here. But Gramp, I wrote something for you. Ed, that's real nice. Thank you. Just leave it. I'll read it later.
Grandpa didn't sound very amused. Okay. So next type of mechanics, and we're almost done through the mechanics, but next type is to inspect a scene and make deductions. Okay. As Prospero, that's what you're supposed to do. You're an investigator. So next. Okay. So this is I picked the rail car inspection as an example. I didn't want to give too much of the game away, so most of the shots are from level 1 and level 2, if you say the scene 1, scene 2. I don't want to give the whole game away, but please go next. Okay, so I was inspecting. If you guys couldn't see earlier, there was a word inspect, so I pressed A on that, and I noticed that there's blood. So the word blood is basically spoken by Prospero. He's not mouthing it. He's not vocalizing it, but you see the word blood to indicate that he's deducing certain things from the environment. Next. Okay, so now he's questioning whether it's human or animal, because that's what you're supposed to be asking. Next. Then he asked, is it an accident or is it a murder? Because those are the things that logically follow from the first instance of blood. Next. Okay. Then he asked, Is it fresh scratches or recently used? Okay, so those are the things that he's questioning right now to help himself figure out how to solve this particular crime. Next. Okay. Now this is the first instance where we see a whole bunch of words show up on the screen. When I saw this, I didn't know what to do with it. I saw crank, crank, crank. I was like, what's wrong with Prospero? Is he malfunctioning? But I later figured out, okay, if I move around, the words start to get lighter or darker. Then I realized, oh, it's one of those things where I'm supposed to move to a specific spot to figure out what this crank business is about.
Mm-hmm.
So next.
Exactly. Another thing is I noticed is that if you move away from the area, the words spread out, they expand, and then as you got closer and closer to where you were supposed to look, they sort of start consolidating into one word.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
Right. That gives you some kind of feedback, to tell you whether you're doing it correct or not. Yeah. So if we got to this place, basically I turned all the way to the right side and it says crank. So that means that's the right spot you're supposed to be. So once you press A, this is what we see. Okay. That shows us a window to where the crank is. We can't really get it yet, but it gives us an idea where the crank is at this point. Okay. Next. Okay. So one more. There's all the different type of narrative mechanics. Okay, so there are newspapers strewn around on the field, and if you bother to pick up the newspaper, you don't have to, but you can pick up the newspaper to get some context about what's happening with this environment. So next. Okay, so Chris or Kay, I'm going to make you read for me if that's okay.
Okay, I can read. So go ahead, give me something to read. One dead in-house fire by Jeff Jermu. Bayfield County. Fire damaged a historic home in Red Creek Valley Wednesday morning. According to officials from the Bayfield County Fire Department, a family of 6 was asleep when the blaze broke out at the remote house, once owned by Albert Van de Griff at 46 Old Ogen Road in Red Creek Valley. Gail Carter, 58, was pronounced dead at the scene. Remaining family members were able to escape. Carter's husband, Edwin, 62, told investigators he may have fallen asleep with a lit cigarette in his hand. Firefighters were dispatched to the scene at 1:22 a.m. and remained at the scene until around 5 a.m. Wednesday. They returned to the property 4 hours later to extinguish hot spots, which had rekindled. Assisting at the initial fire was the Ashland Township Volunteer Fire Department. Mansonville Emergency Medical Services was on standby at the scene. After heated public hearing, no answers for Vandergriff errors by Tom Outen. Bayfield County. Members of the Vandergriff family again gathered in the Bayfield County Courthouse today to debate the fate of the Vandergriff fortune, which has remained in escrow since 1961. When family patriarch Albert Vandergriff, and that I think is 71, died in a mine accident. The after effects, which nearly destroyed Vandergriff Industrial and severely damaged the local economy. James Vandergriff, 38, of Chicago, argued that his father's demands were unreasonable and that many Vandergriff family members have personal reasons for wanting to avoid living in Red Creek Valley on the Vandergriff estate, as stipulated in the elder Vandergriff's will. The recent fire in which the Vandergriff home was damaged, he said, only underlined the family concerns. Since 1967, the Carter family has lived upon the former Vandergriff estate as temporary caretakers.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of reading. So we know there's a family called Vandergriff. At least from the newspaper, we know there's this prestige family. But there's also a fire that happened. So this is giving us context clues. At this point of the game, this is all we get is some basic news clippings, but we still don't know what the point of these news clippings are with Ethan Carter's family. We still don't know at this point, but these are little clues for future gaming. Okay, so next. Okay, so news about moonshine. I guess I can read this one. So please go next. Okay, so this one says, Blaze reveals moonshine operation by Daniel Josephson, Bayfield County. Ashland Township volunteer firefighters discovered an apparent moonshine still while battling a blaze in the woods off Old Ogden Road. According to authorities, the still comprised a propane stove and 4-gallon stainless steel pot, which was used to hold the whiskey mash. Based on the size of the still, Bayfield County Sheriff Hank Schaffel believes it may be part of a small operation, though he admitted, quote, there could be other stills in the county. Officers on the scene recovered a half-gallon of apple pie moonshine and 1 gallon of unflavored moonshine. Apple cider and cinnamon sticks were found adjacent to the still. The police have been unable to determine who owns the still. So again, this is another piece of information that give you a little insight into what kind of people Ethan Carter's family are. There's a little more, so please go next. Oh, did that go off? Never mind. Oh, there you go. There's another piece, okay, right here. So another piece of news article that was found in the fire, basically, is about NASA, of all places. It's very strange. So it says, NASA launches ATS-6 satellite. So Cape Canaveral, Florida. NASA launched what has been called the world's first educational satellite in Florida today, giving the United States a powerful edge in telecommunication technology. The Applications Technology Satellite 6 will directly broadcast educational programming to several countries, including the United States, Canada, India, and Australia. NASA believes the satellite will remain in constant contact with Earth for at least the next 5 years. Now, why is this piece of news interesting or relevant to the gameplay? That is because later we will learn that Ethan Carter has a habit of writing fictional stories. And a lot of his fictional stories are based loosely on some of the pieces of news that he's been reading that's happening in the atmosphere. Okay, so next. Okay, so I'm going to discuss how game narrative can express certain type of game rhetoric. So next. Okay, so as I've shown you from the mechanics to the pieces of notes and everything that we've read so far, there are notes, magazines, and objects that are thrown all over the place in this game. And if you manage to take the time, like Chris said, take your time to research the environment, you will get little clues from those objects to understand what's going on with the game story, okay? Other things that give us clues are character dialogues, as well as Prospero's internal dialogue. So sometimes, even though you, the player, play as Prospero, you can hear Prospero's internal thoughts as he's deducing what he is seeing in the environment. Okay, and those kind of little clues give us a bigger clue on exactly what is the game's rhetoric, which is the game's arguments about society that's influenced the way Ethan Carter thinks. Okay, so next, please. Okay, so first piece of rhetoric, and I'm grabbing pieces from the game. This game is very, very long, so I'm grabbing little pieces here. So the first introduction of this game give you a clue whether or not Ethan Carter is omniscient, which is all-knowing. Okay, so next. And Chris or Kay, if you don't mind reading this part for us.
Sure,
I can take it.
You want?
Oh,
Okay.
do you want it?
No, that's fine. You can go for it.
Okay, Ethan Carter. I didn't know, but he knew who I was. When the police won't help you and the priests don't believe you, you call on Paul Prospero. Oh, okay. I'm Chris. If you want to take it, because part of it's cut off for me.
Okay, I'll do it. When police won't help you and the priests don't believe you, you call on Paul Prospero. You call on me. If you're a kid like Ethan, you write. Plenty do. Ethan's letter started out just like any other fan mail, but soon there were mentions of things that no little boy should know about. There are places that exist that very few people can see. Ethan could have drawn a map. I hadn't entered Red Creek Valley yet, but I already could feel its darkness reaching out for me. Finding Ethan Carter wasn't going to be as easy as knocking on his door. I was too late for that. To find Ethan, I had to figure out what this place was trying to hide from me.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so before we go to the next part, what I wanted to say really quick was that Prospero is already suspicious about the fact that Ethan Carter seemed to know a lot about him that no little boy should know of him. We don't know exactly what Ethan Carter knows, but the hint from the introduction of the game, which is actually what you see when you start the game, give us a clue that Ethan Carter might not be as simple or as uncomplicated as a little boy. There's something more to him in this game. So another piece of rhetoric that I got from the game is that it argues that reality is not what it seems. Okay, so next. Okay, I'll read this a little bit. Okay, so one of the arguments stems from this idea that nothing is ordinary. So this is actually the shot of a bridge that's in the game, and it says "bridge closed, do not enter." So it looks pretty roughed up because all the boards are coming off of it. So next. Okay, so it says, Red Creek Valley seemed like a quiet, ordinary place. I've learned two things in my life. No place is truly quiet, and nowhere really ordinary. Ethan warned me about that, warned me not to be fooled by what I saw here. He didn't need to worry. I worked dozens of cases, hundreds. This would be my last case. So somehow Ethan warned him, and we're assuming that it may be in the fan letter that he wrote to Prospero, that he's saying to Prospero, do not trust everything that you see. So there are two things that are set up for us already. That Ethan Carter seemed to know too much about everything. Why? He's only a 12-year-old boy. Why does he know everything? Second thing is that this town is not as pleasant or as sunny as it seems right now, because this game is truly beautiful when you enter it, but we already got these two hints from the game about the possible problems that will occur in the game. Next. Okay, so third rhetoric that I wanted to discuss is the idea that if you conform to something is to be real. So this idea that you should conform, because conformity means that you are being realistic. So, Chris, do you mind reading this piece for us? Okay.
Sure. Don't rock the boat. Read. A beautiful woman sat by a river. A witch approached and told the woman she was to have a child. The woman began to cry with joy, but the joy turned to fear, and she could not stop crying. Fear turned to sadness. The woman continued to cry. She cried for months, hardly sleeping, until the child was born. But the crying had aged the woman, and she was no longer beautiful. When he was old enough, her son climbed the mountain to find the home of the witch. He asked her if she could make his mother beautiful again. The witch asked the boy many questions. After hearing the answers, the witch told the boy that she had lied to the mother about her child. The boy disappeared, and the mother was beautiful again.
This is just a screenshot of the note that you were reading, or the page that you were reading. If you can go next. Yeah.
Missy, Ethan, the point of life is not to rock the boat. Missy, just try to get along. Stop living in your head. Do something real. That's what people respond to, reality.
Okay. So again, there's some pressure there to tell Ethan Carter, whatever his problem is, that Missy is telling him, you have to face reality here. Just stop trying to be a different individual. Try to conform. So we would hear this, and naturally us as the audience would think this is a negative message, right? That you're telling a little boy who wants to be an individual to conform. So naturally, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is a problem. This seems to be kind of abusive. What's going on here? Okay. So next piece is blaming the child. And this is, I didn't want to squeeze all that in there, but the adults were blaming Ethan Carter, and they were attributing some of the problem to also supernatural causes. So if we can go next. Okay. And does Kay want, maybe Kay can't see all of it. So I'm gonna go ahead. So it's Ethan's fault. Okay. So Missy says, what did you do? What did you wake up? Nothing. I found a room. I've walked into it. That's it. Chat says, you can feel it, right? Something is coming from the Vandergrift's mansion. I think that's, my words got cut off a little bit there. Keep going. Fissy says, I can feel it. Ethan disturbed the sleeper. He must be punished. Travis says, you have to help us. It's the only way. It wants Ethan. Dale says, you're crazy. You've all gone crazy. He continues, Pop, they're getting worse. They keep talking about this thing, this sleeper. Ed responded, I know. What I don't know is if it's real or not. Ethan responded to all of them. It's not my fault. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Okay? Now, I took a screenshot. If you notice on my section divider here, I took a screenshot intentionally of the desk. We don't know whose desk this is, but there are certain books that are on this desk. And these books also give us some clues of what's going on with the game. And I can't really see. I don't know if Chris can see all the words. I can see, for example, I think that's Treasure Island on the left. I don't know if you can see some of the text, Chris.
Yeah, this is Treasure Island. And then this is Mark Twain, a Connecticut Yankee and a king in King Arthur's court.
Yeah.
And then
I can't. I think that says
The Earth to the Moon by Jules Verne.
Uh-huh.
That's really the only ones I can read.
Yeah, I only see, the only thing I really can't see, something says H.G. Wells and then something like the island of, I can't see that.
Yeah, the island of Dr. Moreau. I can see that.
Yeah.
And then I can see something from Lovecraft, but I can't see what the title is. So those are the ones that I can see.
Good eyesight. So obviously these works are sci-fi, are fiction, are fantasy books, okay? These are really huge clues. And later in the presentation, I will connect all this, okay, back to what the game is about. Oh, so yeah, the future is unknowable. So I forgot to mention this. There's another part of rhetoric, which is this idea that you can't really know the future, okay? So next. Okay, so this is the magician letter note, okay? So we're going to go ahead and read that. Okay, Chris, if you don't mind.
Sure, I can do it. A magician once lived inside an old house and made potions that let him see the future. People from the village came to the magician's house and demanded he share his potions with them. We want to see the future too, they told him, but the magician said no. The people from the village grew angry and burnt the magician's house. But the magician knew this would happen. He had already cast a spell in his potion room. The house burned, but the room did not. The people from the valley waited but the magician never came out. And there's a picture of the page. A picture of the hallway.
Oh, just to add that it's technically not the hallway, but it looks like, well, when I first saw it, it looked like an endless pit. Like I thought it was the top of a room, room, and then it's floor. Mm-hmm. I didn't think it was a hallway, but it could be.
Yeah, my perspective is it's looking down a really long hallway, but you're right. It could be at the top of a stairwell looking down and seeing multiple floors.
It could be either thing, but it looks like multiple things there. Yeah.
Chad, why are you standing there? You spying? No. No, huh? What the hell's wrong with you exactly? Nothing. You need to stop leaving your stupid stories around. They're freaking everybody out.
So that little narrative, the magician, is the part where it says that the magician says, no, you cannot know the future. I refuse. And he locked himself in the room. And that does have relevance. I'm just repeating that. Next part, the question that the game asks us is, does your moral actions affect your future? And I know this game is not really based on philosophy, but there's a bit of philosophy in there, okay? And it's basically asking you to question your morality. So please go next. Okay, I don't think I can see parts of that text. I don't know, Chris, if you don't mind reading.
Okay, that's fine. I can do it. Okay. People come here for many reasons. They want to ask me questions about the future. But I can see the future, so it is the past that interests me. If you want to find my house, you must answer the questions I ask of you. Do you feel there is vanity in charity? Would you prefer anonymity over notoriety? Does death bring peace or suffering? Do you love for yourself or for others? Would you rather be a leaf or a root?
Difficult questions, huh?
Yeah.
I asked myself, I'm like, do I want to be known for evil things or not be known at all? That's a tough question. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It started reminding me of, like some of the different psychological questions that are asked, like, are you a dog or a cat? Or are you, it's like, what is what you like? It's like, after a while I was like going like, seriously? But it was kind of fun. It made sense for the storyline, but
Yeah.
it was kind of like
Well, I don't want to give it away, Chris. I agree with you. It's kind of like what's going on. It does make sense for the storyline, but we'll explain how that connects because you can add to that. That's really good. Next section, hopefully I can read this. Another piece of rhetoric, and I think we're ending on the rhetoric part here, is time is indestructible. And this particular scene is really, really long. It's tiny bit graphic. I try to crop out anything that looks scary. But I think, Chris, you might know what I'm talking about. It's that train scene with Travis.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I might have to, again, I think it's the text being cut off a little bit for me. I think I might have to rely on you for this one, too.
No worries.
Okay.
The train puzzle.
Okay, so I'll add a little bit before you start, is that this particular puzzle, whatever puzzle means in this game, is that you have to piece the narrative or the plot pieces, right? The individual plot pieces in the correct chronological order for the game to play you a tiny little movie to show you exactly what happened here. So Chris, please go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So what's happened so far is you found all those clues. You finally solved the puzzle of what you saw along the path here. And then, as Sherry just mentioned, it's a chronological puzzle. So you're going ahead and having to put the different events in order. And as you can see, you have these little ghost vignettes that are showing up. There's one right here, one back here, another one back here, another one back here. And so it's kind of funny because you're like running up and down the the mountainside, clicking and putting things in order to get it to play the little cinematic to show you what actually happened and how you piece it together. Ethan, Travis, listen to me. We can destroy it. I know how. Travis, you can't destroy it, Ethan. You can't destroy time. And that is what he is. He is forever. Ed, Gail, honey, I wish there was another way. Ed, Travis, tell me where Ethan is now. I'm giving the sleeper what he wants, what all of us want. Look, old man, you need to go home. And obviously, Grandpa Ed does not take kindly to being told to go home.
There's a piece of rock in his hand, okay? I don't want to get that graphic. I just took it when he was, doesn't do it.
And then knocks him over, and because hitting him with a rock wasn't enough, Grandpa gets the train and makes Travis a little shorter. Ed, Ethan, run, goddammit! Go, get out of here! Travis, close your eyes. And then Ethan's saying, Grandpa, stay away, because obviously after witnessing that, Ethan doesn't want to have anything to do with Grandpa. Ethan, I'm sick too. I can feel the sleeper in my head. Then fight it! I have to destroy the room. Corvus, I'm sorry, Ethan. I can't let you do that. Whatever had turned Ethan's family against him, the grandfather was trying to resist. Age helps against those things that feed on hate. Not because of wisdom or experience, because they are old and tired. Their hate is less useful.
That's kind of profound, right? You can incite the excitement of the young folks. The old folks are less excited. Now, I know, and Chris knows, that on the surface this looks bad. And also the idea is that we think that Grandpa is trying to protect us, right? For Ethan Carter, we think of what Grandpa's doing. It's like, hey, Grandpa, you saved me. You saved me from a grip of Travis, whatever happened to Travis. Thank you for saving me. But it's actually not necessarily a good thing for what the game's conclusion is about, okay? So, all right. So I have to warn everybody. I put bold, I put capital words. We have to talk about the spoiler, the ending, because the following discussion is on the philosophy that I think is relevant. The philosophy that's relevant to discussing the ethics of this particular game. So I have to discuss the conclusion to connect the conclusion to the ethical theory I'm going to present to you. So next.
So if you're watching this and you have not finished the game and you do not want to know how it ends, leave now and then come back and watch the rest of this thing. So we'll give you a couple seconds. Okay, you've been warned. Here we go.
Okay, thank you, Chris. All right, so hey, the entire game is an illusion. All right, so I have to say, and I repeat this again, this game still today, I play a couple of games a month. I still say to this day, this game is one of the most shocking endings among all the games I play. Okay, so this is what we find out toward the end of the game, that Paul Prospero is actually just a figment of Ethan Carter's imagination, meaning that he's not even a real person. He's just an imagined character, okay? And he's also created based on Ethan's writing, because Ethan likes to write fiction. He leaves fictional pages all around. This is why when Prospero was exploring the landscape, he keeps seeing pages, notes, and so forth, because they represent their representation of Ethan's writing, his writing habits. And we also find out that Ethan hides in a room inside his family mansion because his relatives, his family members, kind of like to bully him. And the reason why they bully him is because Ethan liked to write really fantastic things. And we saw that he read, Jules Verne's, H.G. Wells, he read all kinds of stuff that might scare his family, who's not used to reading sci-fi or fantasy. And they keep telling him, stop going toward fictional things. Be real, be practical, conform to our thinking. So because he refuses to conform, there seems to be signs of abuse that's showing up in Ethan's family. Okay. So his mother accidentally set fire to the mansion. So this means that because Ethan hides in the middle, in a room inside the mansion, it was set up in such a way that he couldn't escape from his room. So he's being burned inside. So next. Okay. So the whole point of Paul Prospero the creation of Paul Prospero is for Ethan to help himself confront the truth of his situation. That means that he's actually in a room and the room is starting to get inflamed, okay? That he has to confront the situation somehow. And he developed a lot of fantasies because before this fire happened, he was writing fantasies. He was dreaming about fantastical worlds. So Paul Prospero, the detective, which is very apropos for this particular narrative, is that he's a detective who is trying to determine the truth and eliminate fiction, eliminate fantasy. So in this way, Prospero is trying to help Ethan conquer and confront the reality of what I listed there, which is smoke inhalation and being burned alive in a room. Okay, so Prospero accepts his reality, that he's just a fictional character, helps Ethan accept his own reality, that a fire is engulfing the room, and essentially he helps Ethan pass on to death. So this was a very much of a surprise ending that most people did not expect. Now, Chris, you did get to the ending, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did that surprise you, or did you expect it already?
After a while, it started to, the abuse piece to it, sort of the tragic nature of Ethan Carter started leading to it. I mean, It was interesting because the one puzzle in the witch's house where you find Ethan's secret room, and it's interesting how they colored it. Yeah. You can actually see flame, not reflecting back on it. You can actually see it looked like first it was like it was shiny and like there was gold halo around everything, but now you could actually go back and look at it and think that that's actually fire. That's actually like the lighting from the fire hitting
Right.
that book area there. So there's a sort of like, oh, like halo thing going around it. But
Right.
afterwards, you're like, oh, okay, it could be fire. And
That sucks.
and yeah, actually, that's horrible. But yeah, it's a really bad ending. Yes. The whole thing about the family and how the family is treating him because he's different, because they're more earthly people. They're definitely more about being in the land and obviously making moonshine and other things like that. Um, and the fact that they're trying to stop him from being as creative as he is, which is interesting. I mean, it's like it seems like the grandpa does. To me, it's interesting because the grandpa is sort of that you can see the grandpa in two lights. You can see the grandpa as just yet another person who is like, go away, kid, you're bothering me, and you need to get your head out of the clouds. Or you can also see the grandpa as doing the thing of trying to protect him a little bit and possibly separating it, sort of trying to provide a buffer between everybody else and him. He's still obviously a very gruff and rough and tumble grandpa, but since he beat someone to death with a crankshaft.
Well, we know that. Here's the thing, though, Chris. We know that. Here's the problem: is I don't think any of the murders or deaths actually happened at all. Like everything that we saw might be fiction. So the way I saw it is kind of like adding on to what you're saying about Grandpa Ed. Grandpa Ed is essentially it's essentially Ethan Carter's imagination of what Grandpa Ed would be. Because the problem is we have an unreliable narrator. I mean, Prospero, we got this whole story from Prospero through Ethan's mind. We have no idea if anything in the story actually happened. The only thing we're certain of is that there was a fire and he died. That's just the only thing that we're certain of. Everything else seems to be, well, it's up in the air. We don't know. And Grandpa Ed could very well be, in a Freudian psychology term, the censor that protects the brain from unconscious content from leaking out, from the truth from revealing itself. So in that sense, he's actually not a good thing in this game, because Ethan really needed to confront his reality. And that's what Prospero was even invented to help him confront the truth of his situation.
Yeah, and the other thing about this game that really made me think of is, there's a new series out last year that's called American Gods, and it's based on a book. And one of the underlying premises of this whole book is that if you believe in something, then it's real. And so the idea of, because the whole idea behind American Gods is it's all these gods from all the different cultures that came to the United States. They left them in the home country. They brought something to remind them of their origin stories. And then when they arrived in the U.S., they created objects or idols that represented these gods. And then as soon as somebody believed in it or had faith that iconography was a god, the god appeared, the god existed. And so, like in one of the things, one of the episodes of American Gods is there's all these Jesuses, and there's like 60 Jesuses, all like at a party, and they're all walking around, they're performing miracles and doing that stuff. But then it's because everyone has their own different vision. So they were from all different nationalities, they were all genders, they were all ages, they were so it's just different ideas of, because somebody believed in this idea, and then all of a sudden it sprouts to life and it becomes. So really, for me, that's something that really sort of stood out to me was about this game, was that if you believe in something, then it's real.
And adding on to that, that's like a great lead into religious studies where there's actually lots of researchers who actually examine folks that says, I saw a miracle, I saw God, I saw ghosts, I saw whatever they saw. Okay. There's research behind that. And really, to say that if you believe something is real to you is not that far-fetched, because there's evidence that if you believe something enough, psychologically speaking, you're more likely to see that thing than other people. So if you believe that Bigfoot exists, you might be looking out for that and go, oh, that's Bigfoot, because it's more likely for you to see it. So we don't want to deny. I certainly don't deny if someone says, well, I saw ghosts and fairies. I don't automatically just jump to the idea that you must be lying. More as in you believe so much of it that maybe you're seeing something that the rest of us are not seeing. So it's a psychological phenomenon.
Well, exactly. It's one of those, like, it's almost self-fulfilling in that, it's like I've always saying, if you're looking for something, you're more than likely to find it. It's
Right.
it's like the studies where they pick out that human beings find faces and everything.
Right.
So like no matter what it is, we're just geared to go, look, those two things look like eyes. Okay, now boom, I can make a face out of that. Same thing, like if you get a car, if you love a type of car, you're going to see that car more often
Yeah.
than before. So I can say that whenever I bought my white Santa Fe, all of a sudden I started seeing more white Santa Fe's on the road, whereas before I didn't know where they were, or in parking lots, especially when I'm trying to find my car. I start seeing there's more and more cars of similar build and setup. Whereas before, I totally didn't even think about or notice that level of detail.
Right. That actually, we talked about that, Chris. I don't know if you remember when we talked about the games and psychology. That's actually the attention theory. So it's called priming. Specific theory, what you just discussed, is called priming, which is when someone says that word, all of a sudden you hear that word everywhere. Or when someone says, hey, pay attention to that car, or you really like that car, all of a sudden you see it everywhere. So I often experience this where the other day I was like, oh, there's no Subarus on the road. Okay. And my colleague said, no, there's actually lots of Subarus in Colorado. You're not looking. So
there's herds of Subarus in Colorado.
No, but I don't see them. I didn't see them. I said, I never seen one. And all of a sudden, after my colleague said that, I started looking out the window. I go, wait a second. It's like Subarus everywhere. Priming. So yeah, that fits perfectly. All right. We'll go next. Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm going to do my very, 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 very best, okay, to explain a very, very complicated theory in a very simple way so we can understand how this connects to this game, because it took me a while to figure out how to explain this in a layman way. So I'm going to take Baruch Spinoza's Monism, okay, to explain what is happening in Vanishing of Ethan Carter. So please go next. Okay, so really quick, I just kind of bring back, because I mentioned it earlier. Again, Baruch Spinoza is a 17th century philosopher. He's specifically a Dutch philosopher of a Jewish descent, okay? He's also one of the greatest rationalists that we have in Western philosophy. So he's very important. He also is very famous for using geometry to create a particular view of God. So if you ever read his book, The Ethics, you will be shocked by the amount of detail, the amount of organization in his book on the way he geometrically explained the position of God. In fact, graduate students have done maps and maps trying to correlate all of the propositions and axioms and claims and proof that Spinoza have mentioned in his book, and it's still not done today. It's one of the most profound things I've ever read, okay? So Spinoza's view of God, he is an absolute being of substance. So it's actually, God has substance, okay? And it's actually an essence that precedes and includes nature. So what am I saying? Before nature was invented, there is God. In fact, we can also say that God is actually nature. Okay, and I'll repeat this idea again. So this argument actually goes against the Christian view of God as an absolute being of nature, which is a being that is separate from, it's a separate being that rules over nature. So it's not part of nature, but Spinoza changed that using his geometric equation to show, wait a second, God and nature are the same thing. In fact, God is nature. Nature is God. Okay, and I'll explain to you how that really works. So please go next. Okay, so this is from his book, The Ethics. So for those who really want some punishment over this weekend, can certainly try to find the book. The book, The Ethics, is publicly available, but it's one of the hardest philosophy books you can read. And I was absolutely obsessed with Baruch Spinoza's work. Okay, that's what I rested my philosophical studies on. So Spinoza argues that God is a substance from which all beings are derived. So every single being you can possibly think of, not just human beings, okay, but everything you can think of is from God, the substance, okay? And also every single thought is conceived from God. So everything is an extension from God, the substance. So I put there in bold, God equals nature, okay? So a monist philosophical argument, that's actually a definition of monism, okay? Monist philosophical argument is this: there is no separation between being and God, that everything is a whole, is one giant circle, okay? That since God is a substance that is eternal and indivisible, which is a thing that cannot separate from itself, and it consists of all things in the world, all beings are thus derivatives of God. So we are not individuals. We are not separate from God, that there's not a God that flies in the sky that talks to us. That's not what Spinoza is talking about at all. He rejects that notion. His version of God is that we are basically little pieces in God. We're like pebbles in God. In fact, the rock is God, and we're just part of God, okay? So we're parts of the totality of God. Spinoza's God consists of infinite attributes. So it's infinite means you can't count it. It's innumerable. We don't know. It's infinite. It goes on forever, okay? But the two attributes that, according to Spinoza, are the only ones that is knowable to human beings, because our mind is finite. We don't have the wherewithal, the mental wherewithal, to recognize the other attributes beyond extension and thought. Okay, so next. Okay, so extension and thought, it gets more complicated. Okay, extension and thought are actually two completely different attributes that have no causal relationship whatsoever. That is because in philosophy, causality, which is basically the impetus of science, the natural sciences that we know today, that science cannot be science if it doesn't follow or recognize the law of causality, okay? Law of causality, which is cause and effect, governs physical things that exist in the physical world. However, extension and thought are not physical things, nor do they depend on each other. So they are not causally related whatsoever. And that's very important for his later arguments. But anyway, all bodies, all physical bodies, any body, okay, are extended from the God's attribute of extension, which is in essence. So why do I add that little blip there, which is extension in itself has no flesh, okay? So it's not the original mover argument. It's not flesh begets flesh. That's not what we're talking about. It's an essence. Basically, if you can think, I don't know, a possible metaphor might be DNA, okay? It's not flesh, but it's the code which all bodies are derived from. All reasons are also follows God's attribute of thought. So our ideas actually come from God and vice versa. Not vice versa, but it all come from God. We don't generate ideas by ourselves. That is because our ideas, okay, is intuitive based on our perception, our sensory perception, our sensory experience of the world. So any idea we have comes from the world. But if the equation is that the entire world, nature as we know it, is actually God, then therefore every idea that we have comes from God. We don't have a single original idea in our head. Everything is from God, okay? So, and he does emphasize that even though our knowledge is very, very limited about the world, because if the only way we know about the world is through our sensory experiences, which is the whole foundation of sciences that we know today, that means that we really can't know of God in its totality. It's impossible for us. We don't have the mental wherewithal to do it. But we still have the ability to, given that we know two things, thought and extension, and that the fact that we are extensions from God, we can know of God, pieces of God. That's what we can know. Okay, so please go next. Okay, I promise you I'm almost done. So here's the argument. If all human thoughts follow from God, and all human knowledge are mere intuitive, okay, from our limited sense experiences of God, which is basically nature itself, then what does it mean to be an ethical and virtuous person? Because what exactly is ethics? Again, ethics is a system of rules governing our behavior, okay, distinguishing right from wrong. So if every idea that we have, all the knowledge that we have, every action that we do come from the fact from God extension, then what possible ethical rule can we actually invent here? What exactly is human ethics? Because it seems to be impossible. However, for Spinoza, here's his argument, okay? To be an ethical person is to exercise our intellect, which is our given ability to be able to reason, okay? So let me clarify this. An idea is something that you intuit from nature. So if you look at the world, you have an idea. But Spinoza would say, well, an idea that hasn't been cultured by reason, hasn't been analyzed by reason, is pointless because you don't know if it's true or not. You don't know if that idea is just made up or your perception is wrong. Okay? So what he says, to be an ethical person is to exercise our intellect, which is given to us from God, right? So when we exercise our intellect, we can know of nature, which is the basic purpose of what we are. We're supposed to know nature, know understanding, basically obtain knowledge. And obtaining knowledge about nature is the same thing as obtaining knowledge from God. So what would be unethical? He says, to follow our passions, which is desires otherwise. Any other desire is a way to lead us astray from reason. Okay, so this is actually, he borrows this from Stoicism, which I'm not going to cover here, but Stoicism is a philosophy that precedes Spinoza's time. It's been around since Greek times, okay? But the idea is that the passions lead us astray. So the philosopher Plato famously talked about the three passions and how, for example, the desire to eat is a passion that leads us astray. So if you get fat, that's gluttony is actually a bad thing, okay? And you can see the Greek philosophy having influence on Christianity later come to pass, okay? So anyway, to be ethical for Spinoza, what we must do is to deny our passions and to exercise our intellect, to use our reason to know God, to know nature. Okay, so next. So I'm going to connect it now. I said a lot of stuff. What does the philosophy of Spinoza have anything to do with a video game like The Vanishing of Ethan Carter? So here's my interpretation, okay? So Paul Prospero, which again is a figment of Ethan Carter's imagination, is a being whose body and thoughts are extended from Ethan Carter, right? Because his own existence is contingent upon Ethan Carter's existence. He cannot exist by himself, which is, you know, the definition of human being under Spinoza. So in this sense, Ethan Carter is God in nature that consists of Paul Prospero. Now, as an ethical being, Prospero also explores nature, which in the game is the Red Creek Valley of Wisconsin, okay? And intuits knowledge about Red Creek Valley, which in turn is also knowledge about Ethan Carter. And the funny thing is, in this game, the entire environment is part of Ethan Carter. Everything that's created, the notes, the news article, it's basically memories from Ethan Carter. It's also stories based on Ethan Carter's writing. So every single part of this world is actually part of Ethan Carter, bodily and mentally. And when we talk about the word mind, I don't want to separate this discussion by not recognizing, okay, that our brain and mind are not separate things. Body and mind are not separate things, as the original philosophers have been trying to argue for many centuries. So next. Okay, so at the end of this game, upon discovering the truth that he is only a figment of Ethan Carter's imagination, Prospero resisted the temptation, so his desire to deny his reality as an extended being of Ethan. In fact, he readily accepted it. He saw the puzzle and he goes, you know what? I guess I'm actually an imagination of Ethan Carter. But nowhere in the text, at least the way I read it, and I hope I didn't miss anything there, I didn't see any resistance from Prospero. He never once said, no, this is not my reality. This is not true. This cannot be. He never resisted it, okay? So in this sense, he acted ethically by accepting his reality, accepting what Ethan Carter is and means to him, Prospero, and he helps Ethan Carter transition to the afterlife. So I just want to emphasize in the yellow here to help you guys understand this connection, right? That basically it is in the act of denying his passion or desire to deny, okay, the truth, to flee away from the knowledge of himself and of Ethan Carter, that Prospero acted as an ethical person. So what I'm saying here is that Prospero is actually an ethical person because he ignored the desire to want to deny this horrible reality that he's not even a real person. And in that sense, under Spinoza's formulation, Prospero is actually an ethical person. Okay, so that is it for me. I try. So I bring it back. What do you think, Chris and Kay?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's more than enough. Now, my question is for you. First of all, the game and the narrative, wonderful. Now, if you were teaching this for a philosophy class, would you prep the students, or would you have the students play it first and then do a debriefing with them?
Okay, so my response to that question is this. It's kind of like what we talked about earlier when I talked to Chris regarding when we mentioned the priming theory, which we discussed in previous sessions of our Metagame Book Club webcast, okay, is that if you try to tell the student the theory, which is, let me explain to you what the theory is, and this is what Spinoza says, you're priming them. So therefore, when they're studying their game, they'll be looking to where the theory actually occurs. So if your goal is to assess the student's understanding of a theory, that's how you would do it. You would first prime them and say, let me teach you. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 weeks explaining what Spinoza is. You're supposed to read the book, read the chapter, and understand it. Now, I want you to go find the significance of this game to Spinoza. That is called priming. Okay, that's using priming as a technique. But if your goal is to free your students, okay, from one theory, which is what I usually do, I don't really want to stranglehold or pour handcuffs on my students, okay, by saying, okay, now you learned this theory, now go find what the theory is. I think that is very much beginning student work. So you're in a first year, maybe first year college, you would do that. But if you are studying philosophy at a much higher level, you should be able to say, look, I have studied, 10, 12 philosophers by now, and it should be more than that, at the end of the semester. You study these philosophers, then you look at the game, you should be able to formulate your own perspective on what ethical theory or philosophical theory is relevant to the discussion of the game. So I guess it's a two-part answer, which is if you're teaching a beginner class, yes, go do the priming thing, say, explain what Spinoza is, and then go, hey, student, go find it. In fact, a lot of graduate courses, even PhD courses, still teach it this way. They go, here's the theory. Okay, now go find it in the game. You can do it that way. It's very easy. The second way is much harder. So if you want to give your student a challenge, you go, okay, I've taught you 20 different philosophers or whatever. Okay, 20 different theory. Now I want you to go play a game, and I want you to find one theory that you want to use to explain what's happening in the game. That is what I usually do with my students for upper level.
Okay, so that was my question, because now if you were using this because you also teach game design, how would you use this to teach game design?
Game design, just this is a side note. I am trying to write a course on using philosophy to make better games, because a lot of games I think are just, it's the same story repeats over and over again.
Yes.
And I'm getting sick of some of the games, and I think they are not very meaningful. So the ones that I feature, at least for our ethics and game series, it's very hard to find games that are, complex enough for us to have these nice discussions. Okay. But for game design, what I do, for example, photogrammetry is actually discussed. We actually have equipment in our college to do that. There's technology that allows the students to take photos from external environment and put it into 3D models and let the 3D modeling take over. So that's done, right? Also, the 4-layer game design approach, the narrative design approach, is also discussed in the classes. So we discuss, okay, this is one of many design approaches. So the student will try to apply to their little game project, and we will ask them, do you think this design approach is better than this other one? Because there's really many type of approaches. But if you're going to make a game that focuses on narrative storytelling and not let the gameplay get in the way or create cognitive dissonance or ludo-narrative dissonance, this 4-layer narrative design approach by Thomas Griff is quite useful, very useful for my students. So we talk about that. The philosophy might be a bonus. I don't know if the students want to talk about philosophy yet, but I'm trying to design another course that might cover this in depth.
Cool. Chris, do you have any questions? before we wrap up?
No, not really. I mean, for me, it's an interesting game. I definitely encourage people to play it a couple times because you're not necessarily going to get everything at the first pass. Especially if you want to get the different the different puzzle pieces to it. It is easy to miss things. One of the things I still haven't been able to find is apparently you're supposed to run around and find a fir cone that turns into a grenade somewhere, and so it's one of those things of trying to find and that literally is just wandering through the forest, the fir trees, to try to find it. So it is a very patient game as you go through it. I mean, the good thing about it is a game. So the sort of horror aspect at the end that really makes you feel for the character and really sort of lets you see the true horror of the whole situation. It is shocking the first time you do it. I think that obviously once you know what the ending is, you're a bit more hardened towards it. So you realize it's a game and then you move forward on it. But it is a beautiful game. It's a well-designed game. But it is one that, unfortunately, like I said, for me, wasn't the type of game I really enjoyed. But yeah, I think it's a good game. I think there's a lot of things you can pull from that game as far as if you want to use it to develop your own games or maybe even segueing into something else. I mean, I really liked the focus on the importance of imagination. I took that from it as well. That the strength of imagination as well as the danger of being too wrapped up in your imagination. So it's one of those things that it's kind of fun because there's always a pro and con to everything that you see in it, which is a really nice balance on the part of the designers. Is that things that are strengths to the game can also be weaknesses for the game as well. So it's an interesting way that they took that dichotomy and set it up.
Okay.
So that's all I got to say.
So I guess that'll wrap it up. We'll be looking forward to the game you pick for us for May.
All right.
And also it's great because it's in between semesters, so more time to actually go and play the game so that we can be ready for you. So
All right.
Thanks everyone. I am going to put up Sherry's information here, and thank you, Sherry, for constantly being our guide and philosopher. So with that, we will end April's Ethics and Games. So thanks everybody, and bye.